afternoon, everyone. My name is Dhipinder Walia. I've been a lecturer at Lehman College for officially a year once finals week is over, which is really exciting. So I'm here really to just give you a really brief sort of anecdote of my experience in teaching a hybrid course. This is my first time teaching a hybrid course, and so I feel like I can give you my experience twofold. One, my first time teaching a hybrid course, but two, teaching a hybrid course when you're sort of new in town. All right, so I wanted to start by telling you sort of how I was assigned the hybrid course and the steps that I took. So I was assigned my hybrid course in one hand, and on the other hand, I was given a list of the different people that I could go to for support. And I bring this up only because I think that's such an integral part of teaching a hybrid course. Sometimes, at least in my experience, I want help, but I don't know who to reach out and get the help from. So my chair and my mentors and my department were really forthcoming in giving me Alyson, Vogel, Steve Castellano, people from the online education department's names, where they live at Lehman, so that I could sort of chase them down and get more information about how I go about teaching a hybrid course. So that was really exciting for me. Once I got that information, I chased them down. Specifically, I chased Alyson Vogel down, and we sat down and had a conversation about what my plans were in teaching a hybrid course. And so one really amazing thing that she provided for me that I hope, if you're not familiar, that you all go out and find from your department is something called a shell course. Does this sound familiar to some? Okay. So it's super useful, and what it is basically the Blackboard course page is already designed for you. So all of the tools that you could possibly want to use, all of the interesting things like learning modules, weekly material, it's all sort of been planned out for you. So all you're doing is personalizing it. And I say all you're doing, it's quite a bit of work, but the basic step of outlining it has already been done for you. So that was, I guess, step two of teaching the hybrid course, getting this shell course. Then, after walking out of the meeting with Alyson, I felt a lot overwhelmed. And the reason for this is because when you're, going into an online education department, they're excited and you're excited because there's so many things that you could possibly get into. So, Alyson was like, there are wiki pages, there are learning modules, there are podcasts, there are all sorts of cool things that we can do. And so I walked out feeling like I wanted to do all of it, and yet I had to be cognizant of the fact that I only had a month to prepare. And so one thing that really helped me was having, and you can't really see that, but I'll read what it says, having a conversation with myself and asking myself, in teaching this hybrid course, what are some takeaways that I have, and what are some objectives that I have for my students? And so for me, specifically, what I wanted my students to take away from this hybrid course, I wanted them to have a way to access different types of material. So I'm not really too keen on just giving PowerPoints. Sometimes I like to give YouTube videos, pictures, PDFs, all sorts of different things. And I wanted my students to be able to access this in one seamless way. So that was something that was really important for me. The second thing is, for my literary genre course, which is the course that was hybrid, my students are generally all across the map, all different fields of study, and for a lot of them, this was their first hybrid course. So I really wanted them to get an experience with dealing with a virtual classroom and what that actually entailed. So that was important for me. I also wanted, and that says a way to track access. When you're dealing with a hybrid course, you definitely want a way to understand if your students are interacting with the material you're putting up, so that was important. And then the final thing that I thought was important for me, but I later realized it wasn't important, I wanted my students to be able to post responses in something similar to a discussion forum. So after having this conversation with myself, I realized what tools that Alyson excitedly told me about I actually wanted to invest time in. And so what I wanted to do now is show you two of the tools in particular that I used. So this is magically my Blackboard page for literary genres. And as you can see, when I was talking about the shell course, so things like this, these buttons, if everyone can see, these were already designed. I could just rename them, but they're all designed for me. And so the first thing that I decided I wanted to use for my course was something called learning modules. And what learning modules really are, it's basically like digital folders. So you can upload whatever material you want, and your student is able to access it in one seamless portal. And so remember, my objectives, one of the things that was especially important for me was having my students access information in a seamless way. And so I'll show you, and I designed it where each module represented a week. You, for science people, I know science people love to do it based on like terms and units. If you're teaching a summer course, which I am in the summer, you can do it by day. Week worked best for me. And so when you, I just want to put student mode on. This is what a student would see. So let's say we're in week 4. This is the layout. So you'll see it's a table of contents, everything. They can see sort of a general idea of what they're going to see, and then they would just click the arrow. So the first thing they'll get is an overview of the week, right? Objectives, my plans, and what I want them to learn. And then the readings and resources for the week. What's specifically really, I think, fun and cool about this is the readings automatically upload, or they're supposed to upload. You're supposed to be able to see the story here. If it doesn't work, then you can just click this, and then it'll open it up in a new window. And so it's sort of, I think it's super useful. I've been I've been super impressed by this so much that I actually have used it in my composition courses where it's not hybrid. It's a way for them to really check off all of the things that they still have to do. And so then the second part, for the sake of time, is something called a voice thread. Now what a voice thread is basically you're able to, and I'm going to start. Hey guys, so what a voice thread is you are able to upload PowerPoints, videos, PDFs, Word documents, and narrate as though you're in a real classroom your way through all that material. And so that's step 1 of how amazing VoiceThread is. Step 2 of how amazing VoiceThread is that students are able to interact with it. So if you see, I want to give you a good example. You'll hear me talking. So today, let's pretend you heard me talking. And then students are able to comment on either questions they have, comments they have. Some students, as they got more comfortable, would give me funny anecdotes. Oh, I love the movie Frozen. The movie Up was so sad, as well as answering the directed prompt. So for me, this was, again, if you remember my objectives, I wanted a virtual classroom. A virtual classroom is exactly what I've got. And so in planning ahead, one thing that I would say, and Jennifer is going to talk more about this, I would actually want to do something where students create voice threads. Students create their own little virtual classrooms, because I think there's some value to that as well. Thank you for your time.
So next we have Sutherland.
And one of the key things is an effective partnership is where 2 or more people are able to collaborate, exchange ideas, and come up with something that the individuals themselves might not do, or better than the individuals. Or for my strategic management course, develop synergies. And she was that kind of a partner, actually. She was a good listening board. She was passionate about teaching and learning, etc. So we collaborated on a wide range of things, looking at the syllabus, course learning objectives, goals, getting into the details of past learning outcomes in different semesters to choose a particular technology that could be introduced into my class. And we chose clickers based upon some assumptions to try to increase student learning engagement, and to also alert me where barriers to student learning were emerging on a quick basis before the exams and the quizzes. So mine is just basically a 4th-year course. There are several prerequisites for it. Students should basically be just about ready to graduate in the business field. Assignments like most of your courses will. so you call them slideshows. Maybe that'll work better. Just basically typical things. That's just my classes. Them very similar to what others have. And I'd evaluate the use of clickers at the first time on the midterm exam. And I chose a couple concept areas and the case problem. Concept areas were those where students across multiple semesters have been having quite a bit of difficulty. I'll show up statistics. And the case study required students to begin to draw upon multiple concepts to reach conclusions, hopefully informed. 4 clickers classes, like a one-room classroom, chalkboard, tiresome instruction, cure for insomnia. Student engagement was mixed. Like I said, there were some of these areas that had persistent areas of difficulty, especially for the more advanced problems where critical reasoning was involved. These are the mean scores on the 2 concept areas. There were chosen entry versus exit barriers. They have a very big difference in terms of industry structure, industry profitability, and corporate strategic flexibility.
I want to point out that here's where clickers actually work the best, conceptual, right? Because if we have to say what's A plus B as people see it, it's the most boring thing for students to use clickers on. So conceptual broad questions that really gets to the meat of it is why we had so much fun with these particular concepts, because they were so difficult for students in previous years.
So these scores, see, consistently, students basically, about half of them get it right, sometimes more, fewer than half of them get it right. The value chain, by the way, is a 66.7 to 2/3, came only in the previous semester where I made an extra effort, traditional lecture style, to help them, so their score was much higher there. And the case problem, again, basically a little bit over half of it was right. Pretty wide standard deviation. The breakdown here. And then we introduced the clickers based upon consultations with Alyson. Take a look now. The clickers this in the shaded area, higher than what had been achieved before, and really no extra effort on my part. And look at the value chain, even another large increase in that area, even above where there had been extra instructional effort in the past. And then we go to the case problem once again. Higher outcome, lower standard deviation, the lowest that I've seen so far. And so students were also engaged in answering questions, discussing solutions with one another, which I think did help them, and trying to understand why others got incorrect answers and chose different things. I think that helped them navigate different problems, enable and be more efficient in trying to solve them. I asked the students also what they felt about the clickers. All said they were helpful. The most pessimistic outlook was that one student said it was a slight but positive learning experience. And one student said he had recalled several concepts that were specifically from the clickers on the midterm, and it helped him. Early results are promising. I think you do need to target the questions where you develop them, or at least at the beginning, where I focused on areas of difficulty. Students need to prepare before class, and it's a good way to make sure they are doing their assignments. And then pedagogical need to drive the technology choice, not the other way around. And of course, regular recurring collaboration with Alyson or the online education office is important. A once and done model limits the type of learning and improvement that can take place. Of course, I'll take another look at the final exam. I'll also take a look at standardized, realized student learning. See if these gains were sustained. Anecdotal evidence since the midterm suggests that they were, but the numbers will tell a story. I'll make some adjustments. We'll reassess it again next semester. And of course, there's always room for improvement. Colleges hear that. Instructors should too.
Gloria, what's your last name?
Janulis.
I'm going to let, what is it?
Janulis.
Janulis. Gloria Janulis is going to present, and I'm going to let you talk about your next project. College of Staten Island.
How do I close? I find that I color code all of my classes so that I remember which one I'm in as soon as I open. I also find that less is more. So I really limit the bells and whistles and where students are going to access information, where they're going to deposit information. What I find extremely helpful is making better use of my announcement page. For my students, I explain the announcement page is like me standing here and talking to you. That's me in front of the class. But it does serve another purpose. When I read through discussion board posts, I had to learn to sit on my hands, and I mean that quite literally, because I would have the computer on and I'd be doing things and, oh, there's a new post, let me see what somebody said, oh, that's so interesting, and I want to jump in and join the conversation. But if I do that, I'm not giving the students the opportunity to develop a conversation that's of interest to them. And learning to sit on my hands is pretty much the same lesson I had to learn when I was in front of the classroom. Be comfortable with silence. Wait. Somebody will jump in to fill that void. You don't have to do it. So I ended up just posting 1 or 2 responses on the discussion board, just so that my presence was there. You know, you'd see my picture pop up and know I was there. At the end of the week, I started to post these kinds of observations, my observations from online class November 6th. And I would just, as though I were talking to them, reading through your responses, and I'd share my own response to what they were saying. But you'll notice that I have some names that sort of pop out in blue. And what I discovered was I could quote what my students have said and weave together this kind of narrative overview of what came out of their discussion. Students get so excited when they see their names on the announcement page in blue. I was quoted. And they would come in and say, I was quoted twice. Did you see that? I've been on a roll. I've been quoted 3 weeks in a row. And it was really affirming to the students, because not only did it show that I was engaged in their discussion board, but that they have something of value to say, something that's really worth showing everybody and saying, look, this was really great. We should keep talking about this. But it also helped me to streamline how much time I'm spending with the online discussion. So I'm reading through all of their posts, and I read throughout the week, and I just copy and paste into a Word document snippets of what people say. And then at the end of the week, I go back, I look, I pull a few out, and I compose this narrative. Doing something like this is maybe taking me an hour and a half, not longer than that, many times much less than that. But it's still shorter than my sitting there reading everything, responding to groups. So this was one way that I found to manage my interaction. The other way that I'm using announcement page is to really remind students of pieces of their upcoming assignments that they need to pay a little closer attention to. Because as I'm looking at their discussion board posts, sometimes I realize, oh, a lot of people seem to have missed what I wanted here. So I'd better go back and give a little bit more information. So announcement page does that. And then I always email the announcement page. So that's been very helpful. Those are just 2 ways I use announcement page. I want to go to discussion board very quickly to show you how I'm using discussion board for students to really have greater responsibility for managing their own learning. And it's right here that we always have forums for our discussions, and each new reading that they're doing that has a forum, I move it up so that it's higher up. But Q&A is always the very first forum. And the Q&A tells students, there are 25 of you and there's one of me. And I'm an early morning person. So I'm on Blackboard at 5 in the morning. You're on Blackboard, most of you, midnight, 1, 2 in the morning when you get home and realize, oh, I'm going to go on Blackboard. If you have a question, I'm not going to be awake. And so I won't see this until the next day. Everybody has to pitch in and help one another, monitor the Q&A, make sure that if you see a question, if you know the answer, you step in and answer it. I've left the Q&A really for students to help one another. And so early on, as students are posting questions and other students are responding, I will weigh in then to say, that was really good advice you gave. You said exactly what I would have said. So that they can trust that I know what people are saying, and if somebody says something wrong, I will weigh in to say, well, that's sort of right, but it misses the mark a little bit. So let the students manage the Q&A. I give very specific guidelines. Nobody is to email me or message me with a question about class. I won't answer it. My response is, gee, this is a great question for the Q&A. Please post it there. And I just really sort of sound like a broken record with the students. That's a good place. Put it on the Q&A. And eventually they stop emailing me and use the Q&A. So letting students take greater responsibility for helping one another with the Q&A, using the announcement page to post global overviews, also emailing or messaging students when they've made phenomenal contributions to discussion board or to face-to-face class, just to say that was really such great insight you had. I so appreciate your participation. Any kind of encouragement like that through Blackboard, the next post from those students, they just take off because it's this kind of reaffirming, but it's also freeing for me.
Just to let everybody know, we want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to talk. But we were going to continue the conversation in the birds of a feather at lunch, so you can go down, grab your lunch, and come back up, because we want to kind of really go deeper into all of these, really fabulous ways of managing our online classes. So, I'll ask you. Sue, do you want to? You can sit there if you feel more comfortable, by the way. You don't need to.
Oh, I'll just stand here then,
Okay,
because,
yeah.
hi, my name is Sue Rocco, teaching at the College of Staten Island, and I've been involved in teaching hybrids for, since its inception, I think it's a little bit more than 5 years. A hybrid course gave me the idea that, maybe I will then move on to teaching an online course. And then I won't have to travel up here, and then I won't have to, and I can teach in my pajamas. And, but I really like the idea of the hybrid. How many people in this room are teaching hybrid courses presently? Oh, so maybe we're using, I'm going to use language that you wouldn't even know of, or you probably have a lot of questions about the hybrid format. Coming to a presentation where 5 people are going to talk, I said, what could I talk about? But I have a really great director, Bill Bernhardt, who said, why don't you talk about the classroom time, the face-to-face time of this hybrid component? Because it's really exciting to develop a hybrid. Oh, I can put this in, I can call Gloria, I can call someone else. But what do I do when I'm in class if I'm shoving all these things online? And the students have to do this and have to do that. What will I do in the classroom? So I concocted a list, a short list that maybe I can talk about. Students are comfortable in a traditional environment. And although the internet and online is someplace that they are becoming so comfortable in, school is school to them. And have also had 12 years of being in a classroom. So that's the first thing that I think goes into the importance of being in the classroom. I teach writing. Well, sometimes I teach reading, but I teach writing basically. And I think that it's crucial for me to get an authentic writing sample from my students, because how do I know it's them? Which is one of my questions all the time. Wait a minute, why does the online writing sound like this and the in-class writing sound like this? So what I do is I'll print a post that a student has posted online in response to an assignment, and I'll bring it into class, and I'll sit with the student, you know, can you open your notebook and let's see what you were doing here and what were you doing here, and something doesn't, well, my sister's in college too, you know, and she's helping me. Well, okay, and then we talk about what help is and what too much help is, and we go from there. So I do like the idea of being in the classroom to get authentic writing samples. Another thing, some people teach because that's the way they earn their living, and that's wonderful. I teach because I love to teach. And part of what comes through in the classroom for me is my personality. And it may not work for 25 students in the room, but generally, I have found that students are receptive to what it is that I do. And what it is that I do is, I don't sit. I come behind you. I tell them, if I walk behind you, keep doing what you're doing. I'm just the busybody. I want to see what you're working on. And so my posture, my lame jokes, my feigning ignorance on something that they might make reference to. Somebody made reference to Frozen. Dhipinder, was it you?
Yeah.
And I, in my class, I had said a line from Frozen, but I have never seen Frozen, and I didn't know it, and they were all laughing, so I stopped, and I said, it was a line that was repeated over and over. Let it go, right, I was telling them, we were talking, but we weren't talking about, we were talking about a writing, some sort of writing technique, and I was like, let it go, and some people, they started laughing, what is it now? You're doing Frozen, I didn't even know what it was, okay. So I learned, that was my one thing I learned that day. So my posture, my attitude, my sitting with you, they get used to that really, really quickly. And a lot of the exit comments are that they felt they got personal attention in class, which is valuable in a writing class. The next thing that I wrote down was my immediate impromptu conversations with them. So online, it has to sit and wait, but in the classroom, I can have a sidebar. I ask them to step out into my office, which is the hallway of whatever room I've been assigned to, right? Come talk to me outside. I usually say, 3 people, can I speak to you after class? And so I have that face-to-face time with them. I know that we have face-to-face time available, but there's a difference in person, I think. But the most crucial for me is that I can assess when a student is lost. You know the look that comes on the student face? Either it's a pretend at knowing what's going on, or you see the eyebrows going together, or the little frown lines in the forehead. So let me tell you about Cosmo this semester. Cosmo is in a hybrid course, and most of my students, as you see in the flyer, are in the hybrid course, well, maybe 10 of them, because they saw it was a 2-hour course. Yippee! All the other English courses are 4 hours, and this is only 2 hours. So Cosmo has this dejected look on his face, because he has now found out. I explained the syllabus the first class. I explained what absences meant. He missed the online, so he now has 1 absence, and he's dejected. He misses again, and I have a sidebar with Cosmo. What's going on? You signed on and explained about the 4 hours we have to meet in class on Monday, and then we meet online. And he had a death in his family. And I see this on him, and I tell him, okay, Cosmo. He hands it in his first paper, and I said, Cosmo, the paper's not a success. But if you stick with me, stay with me, I can tell, because I have his writing sample, I have his discussions, I have his online work. I ask them questions about readings. I can tell you're going to make it. And he did, and he's doing really well. And then this is the part, the personal touch in my classroom that I think comes through. It may come through in a hybrid, like when I wrote "so what" on a student paper, and the student said to me that they weren't very happy with my sarcasm. It was the "so what" technique in writing to push the writer forward. But when I do that on a discussion board, I'm not able to explain it. But if I come to you and I say, "Oh, see where I have so what," and that personal touch. So the face-to-face time for me, I don't think I'll ever be an online teacher, a totally online instructor. I think that the hybrid is the forum for me, and I'd be happy to take questions later on when you come back. Thank you.
Great, Sue. Next up is Jennifer Hamano from the graduate school and teaching at Lehman.
So it's just a single slide with my name, so I
Yes, nothing.
I won't take too much time on the slideshow. So I teach a bilingualism class to speech pathology students, and I realized that I'm the only one who tells you who my students are because I'm not a speech pathologist, and so for me it was a challenge to start teaching to a student group that I wasn't familiar with them. So I'm a theoretical linguist. That's where I'm coming from. So over my classes, one of the things that helped me as I was beginning to teach this bilingualism class was having guest instructors. I went to Alyson because I said, I really want these guest instructors to come to my class, but they won't come up to Lehman at 9 a.m. on a Friday. I can't imagine why. So we worked together, and she helped me develop voice threads. And we worked through the voice threads together, and so I was able to I've been using these same guest presentations for a few semesters now. It's been great to have those pre-recorded. I have the comprehension questions ready to go. It was a huge commitment of startup to record the lectures and get together with the person and figure out what it was going to look like for the students. But I'm really happy I did it. It saves a lot of time down the line. And as I've been working with Alyson, she's really emphasized scaffolding to the students and giving them a transformative learning experience. So I'd like to share with you 2 examples of how I've worked on scaffolding and providing a transformative learning experience with Alyson. So when I started creating these voice threads, I was really excited. I put all this work into creating a voice thread, and I asked my students to watch it. I came to my class after they had watched the voice thread, and they said, and I said, what did you think? And they said, oh, did we really have to watch that? And I was devastated. And so I was talking about that with Alyson, and she said, well, you created these comprehension questions. Why don't you use that as the attendance credit? So from now on, as part of the voice thread, they're commenting on the voice thread. That's participation. And they're handing in comprehension questions on Blackboard that just get checked, yes, complete or incomplete. And that's their attendance credit. And that makes them watch it because they're like, oh, it affects my grade. I guess I have to do this now. So the first semester or 2 was just kind of getting the gears into motion. I started using discussion board because I wanted to have more of a cohesive feel to the course. And finally, after 3 semesters of working on these pieces individually together with Alyson, going step by step as she kind of led me from one tool to the next, showing me how to use VoiceThread, showing me how to implement discussion boards successfully by breaking them into smaller groups to brainstorm answers and then bringing that into a class discussion for the second week of it. I finally, this semester, achieved flow in one of my units, which I was so excited about. So the way it works, so I teach this, the way I teach it is we have 2 in-person sessions and then 1 online session. So it's a little bit of a different format than other teachers do. But for example, I had them, we were talking about code switching, speaking 2 languages in a single conversation. I had them record 2 speakers code switching. They didn't even know what was going to happen. They just had to record the speakers and write out a transcription for me. So they submit that. That was step 1. They watched a VoiceThread lecture that talked about code switching, the processes, all the technical definitions, giving examples, asking them for examples, and you could see on the VoiceThread it's possible for students to give examples and kind of jump off of each other and respond back to each other. I gave them a worksheet so they could analyze their VoiceThread, so they could analyze the transcriptions that they had. So they had to once, watch the video, read do the reading, and then try to manage this really difficult analysis on their own, and they get frustrated. And so I provided the discussion board so that they could kind of bounce their answers off of each other. So by the time we came in for the in-person class, these students had watched the voice thread, commented on the voice thread, submitted the attendance credit, done the discussion board, and as I was monitoring these things, I could write down step by step. This person had a great example for this one. This person had trouble with this other concept. This other person walked it through. So during the class, it was so fast. I could say, okay, so Maggie said, Maggie had a good example of lexical borrowing. Can you share it with us? Great. And you had another example. Can you share it with us? Okay. Somebody had this sentence and had trouble with it. Can anyone tell me what's going on with it? And it was really quick. They had they had spent the time with the technical definitions on VoiceThread and with the textbooks. And so in the in-person class, we could really get the whole class engaged in the conversation. So that was really great. So then at the end of that class, they were able to, again, work in pairs and kind of talk in person about their own transcriptions and their own analysis, and then submit it for the following week, again, using the discussion board. So I felt like the hybrid format really gave me that ability to interact with the students at their own pace on VoiceThread and at their own pace on discussion board, in person as a group during the in-person class, and then let them go back and kind of tie up the loose ends. So that didn't come all together in one semester. That took me 4 semesters to build. So what I really appreciate is Alyson working with me to scaffold the students so that they could do a successful project, but also scaffold me so that I could provide the students with that experience. The other example I have is having my students co-create course content, which is another thing that Alyson's been stressing to me. So like I said, I did that first VoiceThread presentation, and I was really proud of myself. And then for the next semester, I said, ooh, what if the students do that? What if they give their final presentations as a VoiceThread project? And Alyson already had these materials developed that said this is how you create a VoiceThread, and so I could put those on Blackboard, and the students could try it and talk to me if they had problems. We went through it in class a few times, and most of them, I gave them the option, most of them decided to go with the VoiceThread, and it was great. They were able to comment on each other's presentations, and the comments were a lot more thoughtful and a lot more interesting when they had more than 2 minutes for questions and answers, So I did that for a couple of semesters, and then this semester I got a huge class, 40 students for a hybrid class. It was insane. So it was double what I've usually had. And so I said, okay, so I have to get these presentations started early in the semester. They can't all be final presentations. So I asked, I begged, are there a few people who would possibly be willing to go as early as week 3 for the presentations? And my students, 8 of them wanted to go during week 3. Okay, I was expecting 2. Okay, so how are we going to work this out? So I was thinking about it, and week 3 for me was speech disorders and bilingualism. And my students are speech pathologists. This is their field, it's not really even mine. So they did the lecture. I divided it into 4 parts. I assigned each team of 2 3 comprehension questions, and they did a presentation with videos showing aphasia, bilingual aphasia, specific language impairment. They really pulled the content together. The students then watched those 4 videos as the lecture. That was a whole class. And answered the comprehension questions for attendance credit. We got back together for the in-person session, and everyone was so excited to see the video, so excited to share each other's comments, and they were sharing personal stories about knowing somebody with this, disorder. And usually in those class discussions, after the 3rd personal story, you kind of have to move on. In VoiceThread, you don't have to move on. They can keep going and sharing stories and connecting with the material in that way. Also, the presenters, when they were asked a question, if they didn't know the answer to it, they could go back, do their research, come back and answer the students. That's really empowering for the students, because instead of getting asked a question in front of the class and saying, I don't know, and then me saying, well, it's like this, they were able to actually go back, look up the information, and still be the presenter, still have that role. So that really gave them the experience to be part of the co-creation of the course content. And I was really impressed with their work, and they were really impressed with each other. They gave each other a lot of great comments. It really brought the class together as early as week 3, So the thing that I've been really impressed with as I've been working with Alyson is she really taught me to use the technology to support the course instead of using the course to support the technology, which I think gets lost sometimes. So that's the individualization of working with a technical advisor has really helped me out. Thank you.